Canaan, the promised land of God. After many years of journeying, the Israelites have finally come close. But before entering the promised land, they must face Jericho, a city impossible to conquer. God gave Joshua a great mission, but his plan was unlike any other battle strategy. Joshua conveyed God's command: "We will not use weapons to break Jericho, but faith." The priests will lead, carrying the Ark of the Covenant, a symbol of God's presence. The Israelites marched around the city in silence, with only the sound of trumpets echoing across the land. Jericho's soldiers were astonished to see their enemy not attacking, but merely marching around the city. Joshua trusted in God's promise. He knew the miracle would happen at the right moment. As the sun set, no one knew what would happen next. All placed their trust in God. Van Ben MCC Hun. The first day of the march. The sun rises, marking the beginning of the first day in the march around Jericho. Joshua commanded, "Begin the march. We will not fight, only follow God's word." The priests led with holy trumpets, and the Israelites silently followed behind. Not a word was spoken, no hostile actions taken. Only the sound of footsteps and trumpets echoed everywhere. The soldiers of Jericho looked down from the walls, confused and fearful, not understanding what was happening. Joshua knew that even though nothing had happened yet, the Israelites must continue following God's plan. The first day ended, and the Israelites returned to camp in peace. They knew the miracle hadn't come yet, but it would soon. The walls of Jericho still stood firm, unchanged, but the Israelites believed that God had a plan. The Israelites were unfazed. They continued to pray and prepare for what was to come. Joshua, have faith and continue following God's word. He will not let us fail. The seventh day and the fall of Jericho. The second day began like the first, as the Israelites marched silently around Jericho, led by the priests with trumpets sounding. The towering walls of Jericho stood unshaken, as the Israelites continued their silent march under the bright sun, full of hope and faith. The priests led with their trumpets, their determination shining in the golden sunlight as they guided the Israelites in silent obedience. The soldiers of Jericho watched in confusion from atop the walls, unsure of the Israelites' silent march below. As the sun set over the Israelite camp, the people returned peacefully from their march, their faith unwavering despite no change in Jericho's walls. Joshua walked through the camp, encouraging everyone to keep their faith strong, confident that God's plan would soon unfold. On the sixth day, a vibrant sunrise filled the camp with hope and renewed strength as the Israelites prepared for their march. On the sixth day, the Israelites marched silently around Jericho once more, their faith unshaken, knowing the miracle was near. The soldiers of Jericho watched anxiously from the walls, filled with fear and confusion as the Israelites continued their silent march. As the sun set on the sixth day, the Israelites peacefully returned to their camp, confident and calm, ready for what was to come. A peaceful night at the Israelite camp, with stars overhead as the people quietly prayed and rested, preparing for the next day with faith in God's plan. At dawn on the seventh day, the Israelites gathered for the final march, their faith unwavering, as they prepared to follow God's command. The Israelites marched around Jericho for the seventh time, knowing that this final march would bring God's promise to fulfillment. The soldiers of Jericho watched with fear and confusion from the walls, sensing that something was about to happen. The Israelites stood in silence as they completed the seventh march around Jericho, filled with anticipation, waiting for God's plan to unfold. Each day ends with the people of Israel returning to camp in peace, their faith in God growing stronger. Though nothing happened today, they knew that God had a plan. The people of Israel prayed continuously, holding on to the belief that a miracle would come. They knew that God's plan would succeed. All they needed was to wait patiently. Joshua encouraged the people, "We must persist and keep trusting in God." Each day brings them one step closer to the miracle they await. Each family in Israel prayed for the day the miracle would come. Though the miracle has not yet come, they knew that God would never abandon them. The sixth day begins, and the people of Israel continue their march with steadfast faith. The march continued, and the people of Israel remained unwavering, knowing that the miracle was near. The seventh day began with the final march. The priests blew their trumpets loudly, echoing through the air. The footsteps of the Israelites were filled with faith. They knew the moment of the miracle was near. The trumpets grew louder, signaling that something great was about to happen. The seventh march was complete, and the Israelites stood still, waiting for God to fulfill His promise. They stood in tense silence, knowing that with just one sign from God, the miracle would arrive. Joshua knew God's promise was about to be fulfilled. He prepared to give the final command. The priests blew the final blasts with all their strength, calling forth God's miracle. Joshua commanded, "Shout, for the Lord has given us the city." The Israelites shouted with all their strength, their voices blending with the sound of trumpets that echoed everywhere. The walls of Jericho began to tremble, a sign that the miracle had arrived. Large stones began to fall from the walls of Jericho. The ground beneath trembled. Joshua stood and watched as the walls collapsed before him, his faith in God strengthened. The walls of Jericho completely collapsed, just as God had promised. The Israelites marched into Jericho, victory now in their hands. The people of Jericho panicked, and the soldiers fled before the advancing Israelites. Joshua commanded, "This is the Lord's victory. We will complete our mission." The victory flag of Israel was planted on the rubble, marking their glorious triumph. The Israelites entered and took possession of the city, just as God had commanded. Victory was assured as God's light shone over the fallen city of Jericho. The Israelites gathered the spoils, for Jericho was now in their hands. Rahab and her family were saved as promised, a testament to faith in God. Rahab stood outside the walls, witnessing Jericho's complete destruction. Joshua welcomed Rahab and her family into the Israelite camp, acknowledging her loyalty. Rahab and her family gave thanks to God for saving their lives, knowing that their loyalty had been rewarded. The Israelites welcomed Rahab as a hero, grateful for her help. Rahab and her family began their new life within the Israelite community, living in peace under God's protection. Rahab fully integrated into the Israelite community, praying with them in gratitude for God's promise. Joshua and the Israelites stood before the ruins of Jericho, filled with gratitude for God's guidance and victory. As the sun set behind the ruins of Jericho, the Israelites stood victorious, reflecting on the fulfillment of God's promise and their completed mission. Joshua and the Israelites knelt in prayer, giving thanks to God for their victory, bathed in the warm glow of the sunset. New life and settlement in Canaan. As God led them, the Israelites stepped into the promised land, giving thanks for their victory and the fertile land God provided. Each family received their portion of the land, and joy spread everywhere. They thanked God for His protection and abundant blessings. Joshua stood before the people, encouraging them, be strong in your loyalty to God, and never forget His teachings. The elders gathered to divide the land and organize the new community. Unity and peace prevailed. The fields were plowed, new crops began to grow, and livestock grazed on fertile land. New life was flourishing. Joshua stood before the people of Israel, holding the Bible in his hand, gazing over the vast land of Canaan. He reminded them of God's promise and urged them to remain faithful and obedient to His word. They gathered by the fire under the night sky, reading the sacred scrolls together, feeling the presence of God. Their hearts were united in faith, grateful for the blessings of Canaan. The Israelites gathered closely, sharing the wisdom of the Scriptures. In this new land, their unity and faith grew stronger as they passed down God's teachings to future generations. The young Israelites sat beneath the warm sun, reading the sacred scrolls. In the land of Canaan, he sought wisdom and strength through God's word, preparing for the future. The market bustled with life as the Israelites exchanged goods, building a thriving community in the land of Canaan. Every interaction was a testament to God's blessings and provision. Here is the image of the children playing under the shade of a large tree in ancient Canaan, as requested. Let me know if you'd like any further adjustments. As the sun rose over the village, the people of Israel began their day with gratitude. In this land of promise, every morning was a reminder of God's blessings and faithfulness. The wedding brought joy and unity to the village, as family and friends gathered to celebrate. Under God's blessings, love and faithfulness flourished in this land of promise. Joshua stood on the hilltop, gazing over the land of Canaan. In his heart, he knew that God's promises had been fulfilled. The journey was long, but now, peace and prosperity lay before his people. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss out on more inspiring stories from the Bible.